In a galaxy where humans are seen as fragile and insignificant, disaster struck. A child trapped in an inferno with no one brave enough to act. But one man, a human, did the unthinkable. He walked into the flames, risking everything to save a life. What happened next would shatter every belief the galaxy held about humanity. The chamber of the galactic concordium hummed with an electric tension that only thinly veiled the disdain in the room. Towering figures of alien leaders from a dozen advanced species loomed around the circular hall, their bioluminescent robes casting eerie glows across the polished black floor. At the center of it all, Marcus Kane, the sole human representative, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, a calm expression betraying nothing of the storm brewing within. "You've got to admire their audacity," sneered Counselor Viren, her segmented, insectoid body clicking with every word. "Humans, barely clawing their way out of their gravity well, and they think they belong here, among us?" A ripple of laughter spread across the room, punctuated by hisses, clicks, and guttural chuckles. "They're weak," added another, a scaled, reptilian alien whose forked tongue flicked in amusement. "Their bones snap like twigs. Their skin tears like parchment. Their lifespan? A blink. And yet here stands one, believing his kind matters." Marcus held his ground, his piercing blue eyes scanning the chamber. He wasn't here to bicker or defend humanity's honor against jeers. No, his role was to listen, observe, and endure, qualities humans had mastered over millennia of surviving a world that wanted them dead. "The Concordium has no place for fragility," Counselor Viren continued, her multifaceted eyes narrowing. "Your kind is a liability, Kane. We cannot afford liabilities." Before Marcus could respond, a sudden tremor rattled the chamber. The crystalline walls vibrated, and a low, ominous rumble reverberated through the hall. The laughter ceased instantly, replaced by the sharp, panicked cries of aliens as a secondary explosion rocked the ground beneath their feet. "What is happening?" Viren's voice rose above the cacophony, her calm veneer shattered. The chamber's overhead dome flickered, and alarms blared in chaotic succession. Through the fractured skylight, plumes of black smoke billowed into the alien sky. Outside, the city's towering spires shimmered with the orange glow of spreading fire. "Emergency protocols initiated," a monotone voice announced over the comms. "Evacuate immediately. Structural integrity compromised." Marcus stepped aside as the alien leaders scattered like startled prey. Some barked orders to their security entourages, others bolted for exits without a second thought. Amid the chaos, a sound cut through the alarms, a high-pitched, desperate cry. It came from a nearby corridor where a small figure stumbled into view. A young alien child, her translucent skin flashing erratic bursts of color, a clear sign of distress, was trapped on the wrong side of the fire line. Marcus acted without hesitation. "She's in there," he shouted, pointing toward the corridor. "Someone needs to." "She's done for," snapped a gruff voice. A broad, quadrupedal alien stood beside him, shaking its horned head. "The fire's too intense. We can't get through. Let it go." Marcus turned incredulous. "That's a child?" "She's Zyronian," the alien replied coldly. "She'll be mourned. But you, fragile human, you'll never survive that heat. Don't throw your life away." Marcus didn't wait to hear more. He shoved past the alien, ignoring the protests and warnings. His boots struck the heated floor as he sprinted toward the corridor, the smoke stinging his lungs and obscuring his vision. The fire raged like a living thing, licking the walls and ceiling with searing tongues of orange and red. The heat was suffocating and Marcus's instincts screamed at him to turn back, but the child's terrified cries pushed him forward. He reached her, crouching low to meet her wide, tear-filled eyes. She flinched at first but clung to him when he extended his arms. "It's okay," he said, coughing through the smoke. "I've got you." With the child secured against his chest, Marcus turned back toward the corridor's entrance. The flames had intensified, cutting off his escape. The heat was unbearable and every breath burned like fire in his lungs. Outside, the aliens watched in horrified silence as the corridor collapsed in a storm of embers and smoke. "No human could survive that," someone whispered. But Marcus Kane was no ordinary human. Smoke clung to the air like a living thing, choking out light and hope in equal measure. Marcus Kane crouched low, his arms wrapped tightly around the trembling Zyronian child. Her small, translucent body quivered with each labored breath, her skin flashing in a chaotic pattern of fear. The fire roared around them, an elemental beast intent on consuming everything in its path. "Stay with me," Marcus rasped, his voice barely audible over the inferno. His throat burned with each word, the acrid air gnawing at his lungs. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to give up, to let the fire win, but he refused to yield. The corridor was a labyrinth of flame and debris, the heat radiating so intensely that Marcus's exposed skin felt like it might blister and peel. His boots crunched over shards of glass and twisted metal, each step a battle against the unbearable weight pressing down on him. Ahead, a section of the ceiling groaned ominously, sagging under the strain of the fire's relentless assault. He needed a way out, fast. Marcus Kane, respond. The voice crackled through the communicator embedded in his collar, distorted by static and the chaos surrounding him. It was Varrix, one of the Concordium's security officers. I'm alive, Marcus coughed into the device. I've got the child. Need an exit. There's no way through, Varrix replied, his tone clipped and resigned. You're trapped. We're evacuating survivors. You. Marcus cut him off. I didn't ask for your analysis. I asked for a damn exit. The line went silent. Marcus adjusted his hold on the child, her fragile body trembling against his chest. You're going to be okay, he murmured, though he wasn't sure if the words were meant for her or himself. Suddenly, a faint shimmer caught his eye, a breach in the wall no larger than a vent, where the fire hadn't fully taken hold. It was a slim chance, but it was the only one they had. Hold on tight, he told the child, his voice firm despite the raw panic clawing at his mind. He crouched lower, shielding her as best he could, and charged toward the opening. Flames licked at his back, searing through his jacket. His vision blurred from the smoke, and his legs screamed in protest with every step. The child whimpered softly, her small hands clutching at his shirt. Just as he reached the breach, the ceiling behind them collapsed with a deafening crash, sending a wave of heat and debris surging forward. Marcus dove through the opening, his body slamming into the ground on the other side. For a moment, everything was still. The fire's roar was muffled, the air marginally cooler. Marcus gasped for breath, each inhale sharp and painful. Are you hurt? He asked the child, gently easing her away to check for injuries. Her wide, tear-filled eyes met his and she shook her head. Good, he said, managing a weak smile. That makes one of us. His communicator crackled to life again. Marcus Kane, wait, you're moving? Varrix's disbelief was almost palpable. Still need an exit, Marcus replied, his voice hoarse but steady. There's a maintenance hatch 2 levels down, Varrix said after a pause. If you can reach it, it'll lead you outside. Marcus glanced at the child. She was small and light, but every moment he carried her was a test of his endurance. The burns on his arms and shoulders throbbed with each movement, his strength waning by the second. 2 levels down, he muttered to himself. Piece of cake. He forced himself to his feet, cradling the child once more. The faint glimmer of hope was enough to keep him moving. Step by step, he pushed forward, navigating the maze of wreckage and flame. When he reached the stairwell leading downward, it was barely intact. The metal steps were warped and glowing in places, the heat radiating like a furnace. We're almost there, he told the child, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. As he descended, the sound of cracking metal echoed above. He barely had time to react before the stairs gave way, sending them plummeting into the darkness below. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs. Pain flared in his side, but he forced himself to move, his priority still the child. Marcus. Varrix's voice came through the communicator, sharp with urgency. I'm still here, Marcus wheezed, dragging himself upright. He checked the child again, still breathing, still clinging to him. The faint outline of the maintenance hatch was visible ahead. It was battered but intact, the promise of safety just within reach. With the last reserves of his strength, Marcus staggered forward. Behind him, the fire surged once more, a living reminder of how close death had come. When he finally reached the hatch and shoved it open, cool air rushed in, washing over them like a blessing. Marcus collapsed onto the ground outside, the child still clutched in his arms. For a moment, all he could do was lie there, staring up at the alien sky. He'd made it. They'd made it. The sound of approaching footsteps brought him back to reality. A group of alien medics and officials surrounded him, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. You're insane, one of them said quietly. Marcus coughed, a faint grin tugging at his burned lips. Yeah, but the kid's alive. The Zyronian child looked up at him, her colors shifting softly into a shade that Marcus somehow recognized as gratitude. For the first time in her short life, she realized that fragility didn't mean weakness. The first thing Marcus Kane noticed when he regained consciousness was the sterile, antiseptic smell of alien medical facilities. The second thing was the pain, a searing, relentless ache that crawled across his body like molten iron. His eyelids fluttered open, revealing a ceiling of soft, bioluminescent panels that pulsed gently in rhythmic patterns. "You're awake," a deep voice rumbled. Marcus turned his head slightly, wincing at the sharp protest from his neck. A towering Xyronian stood beside his bed, its translucent skin glowing a muted green. The alien's imposing figure was offset by its calm, measured tone. "You've been unconscious for several hours. The child you saved is alive and recovering." Marcus exhaled, relief cutting through the fog of pain. "Good. That's good." The Xyronian studied him for a moment, its multifaceted eyes glinting. "You are fortunate to be alive. Your injuries are extensive: burns, fractured ribs, and severe smoke inhalation. Most of us believed you wouldn't survive." "Guess I'm full of surprises," Marcus muttered, his voice hoarse. The Xyronian's glow dimmed slightly, a sign of curiosity. "Why did you do it? Risking your life for one child? A fragile human body is not designed for such extremes." Marcus's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Fragile doesn't mean incapable. You'd think a galaxy this advanced would understand that by now." The alien tilted its head, processing his words. "Perhaps you have taught us something new." Before Marcus could respond, the door to the medical suite hissed open, revealing a small figure hesitating at the threshold. It was the Xyronian child, her skin now a soft lavender hue. She clutched the edge of the doorframe, her wide eyes fixed on Marcus. "It's okay," Marcus said gently, motioning for her to come closer. She stepped forward tentatively, her movements graceful but uncertain. When she reached his bedside, she looked up at him with an expression that transcended language. Gratitude. Admiration. Something deeper. Thank you," she said softly, her voice melodic and trembling. Marcus reached out carefully, his hand hovering just above her head. She leaned into the gesture, her glow warming to a soft amber. "You're welcome, kid," Marcus said, his throat tightening. "You're safe now." The moment was broken by a sharp chime, and the Xyronian official straightened. "The council wishes to speak with you, Marcus Kane. Your actions have complicated matters?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Complicated? I saved a child from burning alive. What's complicated about that?" The Xyronian's glow darkened, a clear sign of unease. "Not everyone views your actions as heroic. Some see it as reckless. A human surviving what you did defies expectations, and that unsettles certain factions within the Concordium." "Let me guess," Marcus said dryly. "They don't like having their assumptions challenged?" The alien didn't answer directly. "They are convening a tribunal to discuss the implications of your actions. You will need to defend yourself." Marcus groaned, leaning back against the pillows. His body screamed for rest, but the weight of the galaxy's judgment loomed over him. "I risked my life to save a kid and now I'm on trial for it," he said bitterly. The Xyronian child's small hand reached for his. "You are a hero," she whispered. Her words, simple yet powerful, settled something inside him. Hero or not, Marcus knew one thing: he wouldn't back down. "Fine," he said, his voice firm. "If they want to judge me, let them. But they're going to hear the truth, whether they like it or not." The tribunal chamber was a stark contrast to the chaos Marcus had left behind in the Inferno. It was cold and sterile, with walls of polished silver and a ceiling that shimmered like water under starlight. Alien delegates filled the room, their faces, or what passed for faces among the various species, turned toward the lone human at the center. Marcus stood in a transparent energy field, the Concordium's preferred method for ensuring neutrality. Behind him, the Xyronian child and her parents sat among the observers. Her small frame trembled, her skin flashing hues of pale lavender, a silent reflection of her unease. Marcus could feel her gaze, steady and unwavering, like an anchor in the turbulent storm around him. "Marcus Kane," a deep, resonant voice echoed. It belonged to Counselor Vierwenen, who presided over the tribunal. Her insectoid eyes glimmered under the light, betraying none of the derision Marcus had come to expect from her. "You are brought before this tribunal to answer for your actions during the recent crisis. Specifically, your decision to endanger yourself, disrupt protocol, and jeopardize the summit for the sake of a single individual." Marcus squared his shoulders, meeting her gaze with a calm defiance. "I saved a child's life," he said simply. "If that's a crime, then let's get this over with." Murmurs rippled through the assembly, a mixture of astonishment and disapproval. Vierwenen's mandibles clicked softly. "Your species has a tendency toward impulsiveness. The Concordium values calculated action, not reckless heroics. What you call bravery, Others might call irrationality. Marcus glanced at the crowd, his voice steady but sharp. Reckless heroics? Let me ask you this, how many of you were willing to act? That child was moments away from dying, and all I saw were leaders running for the exits. Maybe the real question isn't why I acted, but why none of you did. The chamber fell silent, the air thick with tension. A reptilian counselor hissed in displeasure. You presume to lecture us, human? You are a fragile creature, barely capable of surviving your own planet's conditions. You act as though your actions were noble, but what you did defied every law of self-preservation. How do you explain that? Marcus leaned forward, the faintest trace of a smirk on his face. I don't need to explain it. It's who we are. Humanity doesn't back down from a fight just because the odds are stacked against us. We don't weigh the cost of saving a life. We just act. And sometimes, yeah, it means we get burned. But it's better than standing by and doing nothing. A low murmur spread through the crowd, this time tinged with curiosity. Even VRNN seemed momentarily taken aback. Before anyone could respond, the Xyronian child stood, her voice soft but resolute. He saved me. When everyone else ran, he didn't. Isn't that what a leader should do? Her words hung in the air, simple but powerful. The delegates shifted uncomfortably, their alien features betraying various shades of unease and introspection. VRNN's multifaceted eyes focused on Marcus once more. Your actions have challenged long-held perceptions of your species. Some among us see your courage as a strength. Others view it as a dangerous unpredictability. Marcus took a slow, deliberate breath. Call it what you want. But if you think my actions were dangerous, then maybe it's time to rethink what safety really means. You talk about fragility like it's a weakness, but what you call fragile, we call resilient. That's the difference. VRNN regarded him in silence for a long moment before addressing the room. The tribunal will deliberate on this matter. For now, Marcus Kane, you will remain under Concordium observation. This discussion is far from over. As the delegates filed out, Marcus turned toward the Xyronian child. Her skin glowed a warm amber as she smiled at him, a small, fleeting gesture that reminded him why he'd risked everything. Let them deliberate, he thought. He wasn't here to win their approval. He was here to prove what humanity could be. Marcus sat alone in his quarters, the sterile walls of the Concordium's holding facility pressing in around him. The low hum of alien machinery was the only sound, a faint reminder of how far from home he was. His body ached, the burns on his arms and back throbbing despite the alien medical treatment. Yet the physical pain was nothing compared to the weight of uncertainty. The tribunal's deliberations stretched on for hours, and Marcus could only imagine the arguments unfolding. He'd seen the disdain in many of their eyes, the disbelief that a human could act so decisively, so boldly. But he'd also seen something else, faint and fleeting, doubt. A crack in their rigid assumptions. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Before he could respond, the door slid open and the Xyronian child stepped inside, her translucent skin shimmering a faint lavender. Amara, he said, surprised. He hadn't learned her name until after the rescue, but it had stuck with him. Shouldn't you be with your parents? She hesitated, her wide eyes searching his face. I wanted to see you. They told me you might not be here much longer. Marcus leaned back, wincing as he adjusted his position. That depends on how much the council hates me for proving them wrong. Amara frowned, her colors shifting to a muted gray. You saved me. That's not something to hate. He smiled faintly. Not everyone sees it that way. Amara took a step closer. You're not like the others. You didn't hesitate. You didn't run. Why? Marcus thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because that's what we do. Humans, we protect each other. Even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Amara's glow warmed slightly. I want to be like that. Before Marcus could reply, the door chimed again. This time, it was Counselor VRNN who entered, her insectoid form towering over both of them. Amara quickly retreated to the corner, her glow dimming. The tribunal has reached a decision, VRNN announced, her voice as measured as ever. Marcus stood, ignoring the protest from his battered body. And? VRNN's multifaceted eyes regarded him for a long moment. You are a disruption, she said finally. Your actions have forced us to reconsider what we thought we knew about humans. Some believe you are a threat. Others see potential. Which one are you? Marcus asked evenly. Her mandibles clicked softly. I am undecided. She gestured for him to follow. Amara moved to his side, her small hand brushing against his. He looked down, offering her a reassuring nod before stepping into the corridor with VRNN. The tribunal chamber was full again, the delegates silent and watching. Marcus stood in the center of the room, his back straight despite the pain. Marcus Kane, Veronin began, her voice carrying an authority that demanded attention. The council has debated your actions and their implications. While some view your behavior as reckless, others argue it demonstrates qualities that cannot be ignored. Courage, sacrifice, resilience. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, but Veronin continued. We will not expel you. Instead, we propose a test. Humanity will be granted provisional status within the Concordium, with you serving as their representative. Marcus's heart quickened. He hadn't expected this, a chance for humanity to prove itself. And if I fail? He asked. Veronin's glow darkened. Failure would reaffirm what many already believe, that humanity is too unstable to be trusted. Marcus glanced toward Amara, who watched him with hopeful eyes. Her small gesture of faith was all he needed. I won't fail, he said firmly. The chamber erupted in mixed reactions, but Marcus didn't care. He'd been given a chance and he intended to make the most of it, not just for himself but for the future of his species.
The conference room of the Concordium buzzed with activity, a chaotic blend of debates, holographic projections, and fraying tempers. Marcus Kane stood at its center, his presence a stark reminder that humanity's future now hung in the balance. Around him, alien delegates argued with voices that clicked, hissed, and roared, the tension threatening to break into outright conflict. This is unacceptable, shouted a hulking Bralcaran, its scaled body quivering with rage. A single human act does not undo centuries of fragility and insignificance. We cannot afford to elevate them based on one anomaly. Across the room, the Xyronian child's father, High Chancellor Yorith, rose to his full height. His translucent frame glowed a bright amber, his voice calm but commanding. Anomaly or not, his action saved my daughter's life. That is not weakness. It is strength. Strength that deserves acknowledgement. Marcus stood silently, observing the power struggle unfold. He knew this wasn't just about him or Amara. It was about humanity's place in the galaxy, and whether the Concordium was ready to accept that their assumptions had been wrong. The debate was interrupted by the sharp chime of an emergency alarm. The lights dimmed, and a holographic projection of a Concordium officer appeared at the center of the room. Counselors, an unauthorized fleet has entered the system. It bears the insignia of the Vrax Dominion. They're demanding the surrender of Marcus Kane. The room erupted in chaos. The Vrax Dominion was a rogue faction, notorious for their aggressive stance on maintaining the status quo in galactic politics. Their disdain for humanity was well documented, and their demands left no room for negotiation. They've crossed the line, Yorith growled, his glow darkening to an angry red. To threaten the Concordium itself? This cannot stand. But others were less resolute. The Vrax fleet outnumbers our defenses, another delegate argued. Is this human worth risking a galactic conflict? Marcus stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. If you hand me over, it won't stop with me. The Vrax don't just hate humans, they hate change. They fear what humanity represents. And if you give in now, you'll prove them right. The room fell silent as his words sank in. He wasn't pleading for his life. He was challenging them to stand for something greater. Counselor Vryn turned her multifaceted eyes toward him. What do you propose, Marcus Kane? We are diplomats, not soldiers. Marcus's gaze swept the room, landing on Amara, who stood beside her parents. Her glowing form radiated trust, hope, a belief that he couldn't let down. Let me lead the defense, Marcus said. Humanity survived worse odds before. Give us the chance to prove what we can do. You're a single human, a voice sneered. Maybe, Marcus replied, his voice unwavering. But one human was enough to save a child. Let's see what more can do. The Concordium fleet mobilized, its ships forming a defensive perimeter around the planet. Marcus stood aboard the command deck of a Xyronian cruiser, his burned hands gripping the rail as he studied the tactical readouts. Concordium officers moved around him, their expressions wary but determined. Enemy fleet approaching, announced a sleek, amphibious officer. ETA. 3 minutes. Marcus nodded. He'd fought fires, not battles, but survival was survival, and strategy didn't care about scale. He turned to the crew. Position our ships to force them into the asteroid field. They'll lose their numbers advantage in tight quarters. The officer hesitated. You're sure this will work? Marcus gave a faint smile. You trusted me in the fire. Trust me now. When the Vrax fleet arrived, they met unexpected resistance. The Concordium ships, bolstered by Marcus's unorthodox tactics, held their ground. In the chaos of battle, Marcus directed precision strikes, exploiting the Vrax fleet's overconfidence and forcing them to retreat. Amara watched the battle unfold from the planet's surface, her colors shifting with every maneuver. She clenched her small hands, willing Marcus and the fleet to succeed. When the last Vrax ship vanished into hyperspace, a cheer erupted across the command deck. Marcus exhaled, his exhaustion finally catching up to him. But he allowed himself a smile. The tribunal reconvened days later, the mood profoundly different. Marcus stood before them again, but this time, there were no sneers, no doubts. Counselor Vierwynen rose, her voice carrying the weight of the Concordium's decision. Marcus Kane, through your actions, humanity has proven its value, not through strength of body, but through resilience, ingenuity, and courage. We welcome humanity as a full member of the Concordium. The room erupted in applause. Marcus glanced at Amara, who glowed a brilliant amber, her pride unmistakable. He gave her a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had changed both their lives. For the first time, humanity wasn't just a fragile species on the edge of extinction. They were a force to be reckoned with, a reminder that fragility could hold within it an unbreakable strength.